Now, this video is going to be just a little bit out of the norm for me, but it'll still very much relate to Star Wars, which as most of you know is and always will be my central focus on this channel. But as of late, I, and most likely you watching this, have noticed a sense of disconnect between many major companies in the entertainment industry and their core group of fans or customers. Despite the fact that nowadays, companies have more access to customer feedback than ever before, thanks of course to the internet. I mean, any company that truly wants to know the mood of their fan base can take to YouTube or Reddit or any other place and literally eavesdrop on their customers and see what they're talking about and get a sense of how fans truly and honestly feel about their products. Or they can just look at their own Twitter accounts or forums on their own official websites and see what people are literally saying to them. Which all means the amount of data these companies can gather today is staggering, even when compared to only 10 to 15 years ago, when social media was really just starting to come into its own. And yet oftentimes these companies make giant blunders today that seem to go against everything their customers have been saying. A fairly recent example of this for Star Wars fans was the eagerly awaited game Battlefront 2, which, thanks to fan outrage, saw EA scrap plans last minute to have a pay-to-win system in place where players could purchase loot boxes to get an edge over fellow gamers who didn't want to spend more on the game than the initial $60 price tag. Another even more recent example is Blizzard, who at their big convention, BlizzCon, announced a new mobile Diablo game, despite the fact that pretty much the entire Diablo fanbase was hoping for and expecting an announcement concerning PC-based Diablo games, which is where that franchise was born and has always thrived, becoming one of the most popular gaming franchises in history, and where the core fandom will likely always want to remain. And these are only a couple examples, but the disconnect between fans and companies isn't exclusive to video games, because the Star Wars film franchise, mostly in the wake of The Last Jedi, has angered a sizable percentage of its fanbase and done virtually nothing in an effort to smooth things out with them. In fact, many within Lucasfilm, or closely associated with them, have stoked the flames of dissent with fans because of some of the comments they've made, while Lucasfilm and parent company Disney have sat by and quietly allowed this to continue. So what exactly is going on here? Well, you could probably begin and end the argument by just saying it's all motivated by money, and you'd of course be right, but let's try and look a little deeper at this problem, of which there are two main components, and really figure out why this disconnect is happening. First, and mind you, this isn't meant as a defense of these companies, but it's just a simple truth. There is a fine line between catering entirely to your existing fanbase or customers and trying to lure in new customers. And mainly those new customers you're going to seek will of course come from the younger generation, a generation that is now growing up with nearly infinite entertainment options at their fingertips 24/7. And the competition by companies to not only get their attention, but to capture it for long enough to make the proverbial dollar or two off of them is intense. And in my previous video, I stated that I didn't think Star Wars was going to have the same impact on this current generation that it did with the generation that grew up with the prequels, and especially not with the generation that grew up with the original trilogy. And the reason for that, of course, is because kids nowadays can see a Star Wars movie and then immediately move on to some other form of entertainment that's just as captivating, if not even more so, than a Star Wars movie. Whereas if you were a kid who saw Star Wars in 1977, you didn't see anything quite like it again for another 3 years when The Empire Strikes Back came out, nor were you playing video games or watching movies on your phone, or likely anywhere else for that matter, because things like cable TV, VCRs, and early video game systems like the Atari 2600 were only really starting to emerge in this time period. And even if you were fortunate enough to own one of these things, it required the use of likely the only TV you had in your home. So what did you do instead? Well, if you were like me, you played Star Wars with your friends in some respect. Nowadays, sure, some kids, maybe a lot of kids for all I know, do still get together with their friends and play the old-fashioned way, if you will. But a lot of kids, teens, and young adults, as well as adults, let's be honest here, are now playing video games with their friends online. And though I certainly played a fair share of video games with my friends growing up, when I was young I never had the option to hop online to challenge anyone and everyone else out there in the world who might be playing the same game as me. And no, I'm not trying to sound jealous or like I think it was all better back in my day, because in many ways it wasn't. I'm trying to point out that a perfect storm has occurred here, when where all these companies are desperate to get your attention and your kids' attention, so much so that they will more or less stoop to anything, which means not focusing just on games that are good per se, but making ones that are addicting, and as addicting as possible to trigger that reward system when we advance in them. And so these game companies have come to realize that the best way to make money now is by playing off the desire for instant gratification and the dopamine hit that comes with it. Because again, people aren't just playing games by themselves or maybe with a few friends in a room. They're now playing games against the world. There's always someone out there better than you or that has something, a weapon or a piece of gear, that you don't have, and for a mere $5, you can have it too. And for most people, $5 isn't all that unreasonable of a price, nor is maybe even $10 or $20. And even if it is unreasonable to you, that desire to win may just drive you to spend the money anyway. Problem is, it's not just a one-time purchase. Many end up spending $5 or $10 here and there until it really starts to add up. Soon you've spent hundreds, if not in some cases thousands of dollars, without even realizing it. In other words, there's not much motivation for companies to make one great game that comes with just a one-time price tag of $60, a game that likely took years and millions to develop, when they can give you a mobile game that's cheaper and easier to create and is initially free, but that ends up nickeling and diming you to death without you even realizing it, until you become the proverbial frog in a pot of slowly heated water, who never jumps out because you didn't realize it started to boil. And with this changing landscape, or shift in where gaming companies have the most potential to make money, they're now less inclined to cater to that long-term customer who will spend $60 every few years perhaps when a new game in their beloved franchise comes out, and more prone to target that instant gratification crowd who will literally pay any price to win and will keep paying it to keep winning. But there is another component for this disconnect between companies and customers or fans, one that certainly affects games to some extent, but hits films and shows much harder it seems, and that is the fear of being condemned in the court of social media. What do I mean by that? Well, in today's world, careers and or entire companies can be destroyed in an instant because of one mistake, or even by uttering one wrong word. If you wonder why Lucasfilm and Disney aren't rushing to try and do something about all these fans proclaiming to leave the Star Wars fandom, it's because those walking away have been labeled intolerant of the diversity modern Star Wars is pushing. So to defend them would now be seen as defending the intolerant, which would be a PR nightmare for them. So instead they sit back and, as I mentioned earlier, let some of their own employees or associates lash out at the fans. And to be absolutely clear, I and a vast majority of fans have no issue with diversity in Star Wars. However, we do have an issue when the point of the movies seems to become more about showcasing diversity and not so much about the story itself. And because of this, the story, of course, suffers, which turns fans away, which then gets them labeled as intolerant because they're not embracing diverse Star Wars, which means Disney and Lucasfilm can't do anything to try and bring them back because they too would get labeled. And no, I'm really not trying to offer sympathy for these big companies, even though they seemingly find themselves in no-win scenarios, because critics these days are, of course, looking for diversity in movies and will essentially penalize you for not having it. Just look at the positive reviews for The Last Jedi. Many of them praise the movie for its diversity and showcasing strong women. That's somehow become more important to them than the story itself. Yet, most fans don't really care about diversity. They just want good characters, and they don't so much care about the gender or race. And that's not me trying to advocate for just movies with white men in them. That's me saying if you make a good character, the race and gender will be irrelevant, and your fan base will accept them. Problem is, as crazy as it might sound, it's not about what your fan base or customers want anymore. It's about how you'll be perceived in the court of social media that truly matters, where people who could care less about Star Wars itself feel the need to judge it even though they don't generally watch the movies or buy the merchandise. In other words, they don't care about Star Wars or whatever franchise it might be, only what it can represent. And what I've always found so odd about those who preach diversity is that they don't actually want things to be diverse. They want everything to be a very specific way. They say they want people to express themselves in whatever fashion they desire, but if someone tries to create something that only appeals to a certain group of people, they become the enemy. Because those who fight for diversity just want everything to be accessible to everyone and completely ignore the fact that we're all individuals with our own set of interests and beliefs. And usually when you try very hard to make something that appeals to everyone, it ends up appealing to no one. And ironically enough, if, say, the next Star Wars movie only had women in it, it would be praised by many for being diverse, and if anyone questioned not putting any men in the movie, they'd be labeled as sexist. And therein lies the problem with diversity. There are certain stipulations upon it, and it doesn't actually apply to everyone. And these insane rules now dictate the way entertainment is allowed to be created. And those who don't play by the rules in the industry are chastised in the court of social media and can have their careers or businesses ruined. And I know there will be some who will want to take to the comments and try to chastise and destroy me for everything I'm saying here. And to those people, I say go ahead. I have no problem with people expressing themselves however they choose. And furthermore, I have zero interest in censoring anyone's opinion, even if it's radically different from mine. In fact, if we're open-minded, which I very much try to be, and if we just listen to each other, we tend to learn much more from those who have varying opinions than those who just nod their heads and agree with us. Which is my way of trying to advocate a truly positive form of diversity, one where we're all allowed to say what we want, or create or consume the games and movies we want, without fear of reprisal from those who want all forms of entertainment to be a certain way, despite no actual interest in consuming those forms of entertainment. And though we live in a rapidly changing world, and as I said at the start, it is all about money, and I certainly understand companies need to make it to survive. I hope these companies can one day learn to take a step back and focus on the actual entertainment part of their industry again. I hope they can learn to create true works of original art once more, whether they be games, movies, shows, or whatever, that are unburdened from having to conform to a strict list of social standards, or that trick us into spending small amounts of money on them until they bleed us dry. I want fans to be treated like the loyal customers that they are, not belittled because they don't like propaganda inserted into their favorite movies. I want to be inspired again by our forms of modern entertainment, not preached to and begged for $5 to make my gaming experience a little better. Well, that's all I've got for this time, and as usual, I'd love to know what you all have to say on this topic of the radically changing entertainment industry, both in terms of the nickel and diming of microtransactions in games, and about the pressure for all forms of entertainment to conform to social constructs so that they're accessible to everyone, even though sometimes it costs them their core fan base. So leave a comment below, and let's talk some Star Wars and entertainment in general. And until next time, thanks for watching.